163. Later kings of the same dynasty only infrequently mentioned the pair, most likely as a part of ceremonial formulas meant to tie their reigns to a longer tradition. 164. In Assyria, Anu appears for the first time in an inscription of Shamshi-Adad, who described him as one of gods who bestowed kingship upon him. 10. A temple of Adad which he built in Azza later came to be dedicated to both the weather god and Anu. 165. 166. It was accompanied by a ziggurat, Ramana, house of the radiance of heaven. 167. Daniel Schwimmer suggests that the pairing of those two gods was based on the common view that they were father and son. 166. No direct references to the worship of Anu are known from the part of the Old Babylonian period during which the cults of Uruk were temporarily relocated to Kish in the north of Babylonia. 168. A possible exception is a deity or deities designated by the logogram and .dinanna. 168. However, it has also been proposed that it represents not Anu and Inanna as a pair, as commonly assumed. 169. But a specific manifestation of Inanna. 168. Urkichum. 170. Presently there is no agreement regarding this problem in scholarship, and which deity or deities it refers to remains uncertain. 171. In documents from the reign of the first Sealand dynasty, the Did of Enlil and Ea, Enki, replaced the triad containing Anu. 172. The only god list known from the Sealand archives does not mention Anu at all, and simply begins with Enlil. 173. He is nonetheless attested in a few offering lists. 174. Furthermore, it is possible the name of the king Akurduana might be theophoric and should be translated as raging flood of Anu, though this remains uncertain, and the ordinary word heaven might be the correct translation of Thusinan in this case instead. 175. The so-called Babylonian temple list, most likely composed in the first millennium BCE, mentions no temples of Anu, though with the exception of Larsa, Ur and Eridu the southernmost cities are generally poorly represented in it. 176. A single liturgical text indicates that a temple of Anu called Ekinamar possibly existed in Kesh. 177. The hymn BRM48 lists 10 names of temples associated with him. 178, including Enki. 179, and the Agalan Kaya, possibly located in Uruk. 180, in the Neo-Babylonian period, Anu only had a small sanctuary in Uruk. 181, he has been described as a comparatively minor deity in the religious practice of this period. 181, 182, while multiple Neo-Babylonian archives from Uruk have been excavated and published, so far research revealed only a small number of people bearing theophoric names invoking Anu before the reign of Nabonidus, with a total of 5 being mentioned in known documents according to the highest estimate. 183. The most historically notable example is Anu-Uiddin, who was the governor of Uruk during the reign of Nabopolassar. 184. The number of such names started to rise during the reign of Nabonidus. 185. Documents from the reign of Darius I show further growth, though names invoking chiefly northern Babylonian deities, as well as Naniah, Ishtar and Shamash, from Larsa, remain numerous. 186. It has been proposed that the change in favor of Anu accelerated during the reign of Xerxes I. 186, after a rebellion of the northern Babylonian cities against Persian rule in 484 BCE. This king seemingly reorganized the traditional structure of Mesopotamian clergy, and while Uruk did not rebel, it was not exempt from changes. 187. it has been proposed that the older priests, who were often connected to the northern cities and were predominantly involved in the cult of Ishtar, were replaced by a number of powerful local families dedicated to Anu. 187. Julia Krull suggests that their members likely planned to expand the scope of Anu's cult in the Neo-Babylonian period already, but were unable to do so due to the interests of the kings, who favored Marduk as the head of the pantheon. 188. Theological reforms in Achaemenid and Seleucid Iraq. Xerxes' retaliation against the clergy of Iraq resulted in the collapse of Vienna as the center of Iraq's religious life and economy, and made the creation of a new system centered on the worship of Anu and his force of Antu, rather than Ishtar and Mania, possible. 188. The details of its early development are not well understood, as Mesopotamian texts from the later years of Achaemenid rule pertaining to temple administration and other religious affairs are scarce. 188. The city as a whole did not decline, and it served various administrative and military purposes, as attested for example in documents from the reign of Darius II. 188. It has even been described as the biggest and most prosperous city in Mesopotamia in the final centuries of the first millennium BCE. 189. It is assumed that Anu's ascent to the top of the official pantheon was complete by the year 420 BCE. 190. In theophoric names, he already predominates in economic documents from the reigns of Artaxerxes I and Darius II. 190. In sources from the following Seleucid period, the cult of Anu appears to be flourishing. 188. A new temple, dedicated jointly to him and Antu, Theta, head temple, 191, was constructed at some point and became the new center of the city's religious life. 190. Oldest dated attestation of this structure comes from a text which was apparently originally compiled during the reign of Seleucus and Antiochus, presumably either Seleucus I Nicator and Antiochus I Soter, 292/1281/0 BCE, or of Antiochus I and his son Seleucus, 280/79. 267/6 BCE. 192. The BTR complex also included a new ziggurat, the era, Sumerian, House of the Universe, 193, the biggest such structure known from Mesopotamia and second biggest overall after the Elamite complex at Kagaz-Anbil. 194. Its name was likely borrowed from a similar structure in Nippur dedicated to Enlil. 195. Multiple explanations have been proposed for the elevation of Anu, though they must remain speculative due to lack of direct evidence. 9. It has been argued that it was modeled on the position of Ahura Mazda in religion of the Achaemenids. 196. But Paul Al-Anbolu points out that since first signs of it are already visible under Nabonidus, it is implausible that it was patterned on Persian religion. 9. At the same time, he considers it possible that Achaemenid administration encouraged the worship of Anu, viewing it as a way to limit the influence of Babylon and its elites on inhabitants of other Mesopotamian cities. 197. Similar connection has been proposed in the case of Anu and Zeus. 31. But also remains uncertain. 142. Bolia instead proposes that Anu's rise was in part inspired by a network of syncretism associations between Imam Shah, who was also worshipped in Iraq, and the Assyrian head god Ashur, who in Assyria could be identified with the latter. 23. However, Julia Krull points out there is no certainty that Shah was actually understood as Ashur in Iraq, let alone that he was regarded as a form of Anu by local clergy. 181. Oliu himself admits that most of the evidence which might support his theory might instead simply indicate that both the elevation of Asa and Anu relied on similar pre-existing models, such as the theology centered on Enlil. 198. Since during the Neo-Babylonian period Uruk was forced to accept the theology of Babylon, it is also possible that the elevation of Anu was seen as a manifestation of local identity. 9. At the same time, it is not impossible that the new centralized Anu cult was patterned on the Babylonian theology, and even a number of festivals and rituals of Anu might have been patterned after those of Marduk. 199. Instances for writing compositions dedicated to Marduk or Enlil to suit the new Anu cult are known too. 200. Are source commonly employed by the theologians and antiquarians working on the elevation of Anu where God lists, such as An equals Anum, which provided the evidence needed to justify both this change and other examples of restructuring the city pantheon. 21. Most likely the growing interest in astronomy and astrology among the clergy also played a role. 201. Uruk in late Seleucid and Parthian periods. While it is assumed that religious activity in Uruk continued through the late Seleucid and early Parthian periods, a large part of the BTR complex was eventually destroyed by a fire. 202. It was rebuilt as a fortress, and while a small temple was built next to it in the Parthian period, most likely Mesopotamian deities were no longer worshipped there. 202. According to a Greek inscription dated to 111 CE, the deity worshipped in Uruk in the early 1st millennium was apparently otherwise unknown. Gorius, whose temple was built during the reign of Vologases I of Parthia in a foreign style resembling Roman buildings. 203. Final cuneiform text from the site is an astronomical tablet dated to 79 or 80 CE, possibly the last cuneiform text written in antiquity. 204. It is assumed that the last remnants of the local religion and culture of Uruk disappeared by the time of the Sasanian conquest of Mesopotamia, even though the worship of individual deities might have outlasted cuneiform writing. 204. Mythology. Sumerian creation myth. The main source of information about the Sumerian creation myth is the prologue to the epic poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld, 205, 206, which briefly describes the process of creation. At first there is only Namu, the primeval sea. 207. Then, Namu gives birth to An, the Sumerian name for Anu, the sky, and Ki, the earth. 207, and Ki mate with each other, causing Ki to give birth to Enlil, the god of wind. 207, Enlil separates An from Ki and carries off the earth as his domain, while An carries off Theski. 208, in Sumerian, the designation An was used interchangeably with the heavens, so that in some cases it is doubtful whether, under the term, the god An or the heavens is being denoted. 209, 210, in Sumerian cosmogony, heaven was envisioned as a series of 3 domes covering the flat earth. Winking sad smiley. 211, 10, each of these domes of heaven was believed to be made of a different precious stone. 211, and was believed to be the highest and outermost of these domes, which was thought to be made of reddish stone. 10, Inanna myths. The original Sumerian clay tablet of Inanna and Devi, which is currently housed in the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago. Inanna and Devi, 212, otherwise known as Goddess of the Fearsome Divine Powers, is a 184-line poem written in Sumerian by the Akkadian poet Enheduanna. 213. It describes An's granddaughter Inanna's confrontation with Mount Devi, a mountain in the Zagros mountain range. 213, and briefly appears in a scene from the poem in which Inanna petitions him to allow her to destroy Mount Devi. 213, and warns Inanna not to attack the mountain. 213. But she ignores his warning and proceeds to attack and destroy Mount Ibai regardless. 213. The poem Inanna Takes Command of Heaven is an extremely fragmentary, but important, account of Inanna's conquest of the Eanna Temple in Uruk. 147. It begins with a conversation between Inanna and her brother Uchu in which Inanna laments that the Ine Temple is not within their domain and resolves to claim it as her own. 147. The text becomes